The wind cut through the valley like a whip, carrying with it the scent of rain and gunpowder. The horizon burned in orange and gold as the sun dipped behind the ridges, leaving the world bathed in a dying glow. A man stood very broad-shouldered, weathered by years of ranch life, his hat pulled low, his jaw tight. In front of him, standing barefoot on the dust, was the woman who had once softened him, now spitting venom through trembling lips. "I'd rather die than be yours," she shouted, her voice cracking but defiant. The words sliced through the space between them like a blade. For a moment, he didn't breathe. The rancher, known through 3 counties for his iron will and quiet cruelty, stood frozen. His fingers hovered near his holster, not because he meant to shoot here but because the instinct to control, to dominate, had always been his shield. He'd never been defied this way, not by a man, and certainly not by her. Her name was Clara. She'd come into his life like a dust storm, wild, uninvited, and impossible to ignore. When he'd first found her, half dead and trembling behind his barn, she had no memory of how she'd come so far from her tribe. Her wrists had been raw, bound too long by the coarse rope of slavers. He'd untied her, fed her, given her shelter. In return, she had given him silence and eyes that could see straight through his armor. Now, that same woman glared at him with the fury of the whole desert in her soul. "You think saving me means you own me?" she hissed. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "You think you can keep me here like some broken horse you can tame?" The rancher clenched his teeth, his voice low. "You'd be dead if it weren't for me." "I'd rather be dead," she shot back, stepping closer, her chest heaving. "At least the dead are free." The words hit harder than he expected. He'd known pain before, real war, betrayal, the endless loneliness of the plains, but this was different. Her words hollowed him out from the inside. He stared at her face, caked with dust and tears, her hair tangled from wind and sleepless nights. He remembered the nights she had whispered in her sleep, begging unseen monsters to stop hurting her. He remembered sitting outside her door, guarding her like a man guards his own soul. He thought saving her would make her stay. He thought kindness, in his rough and clumsy way, would mean gratitude, maybe even affection. But now, all he saw in her eyes was defiance and disgust. The silence stretched between them, heavy as the storm clouds gathering over the ridge. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, echoing the ache neither of them wanted to name. "You don't understand," he said quietly, almost pleading. "Out here, you won't last alone." Clara's lips curled in something between a laugh and a sob. "Then I'll die on my feet. Better than living on my knees." He felt something shift inside him, then a cracking of old, buried pride. He'd always believed the world ran on power, that strength and possession were the only laws worth obeying. But standing before her now, that belief wavered. Still, he couldn't let go. "I saved your life," he said, his voice trembling for the first time in years. "That ought to mean something." "It does," she replied. "It means I owe you thanks, not my soul." The words were soft but final. The rancher's hand fell from his belt. His revolver felt like dead weight, useless against this kind of truth. He turned his gaze toward the barn, the corral, the endless stretch of land he had fought to build with his bare hands. All of it, his cattle, his fences, his pride, suddenly felt small compared to her fire. He'd been alone for so long that he didn't know how to want something without trying to own it. And now, he saw it clearly. As she wasn't rejecting him out of hatred, she was rejecting the part of him that still believed love was a transaction. "You're free to go," he finally said, voice rough, barely audible over the rising wind. She blinked, surprised, as if she hadn't expected to win. "You mean that?" He nodded once, jaw tight. "I ain't the kind of man who takes what ain't his." "Not anymore." For a heartbeat, she looked at him, or really looked. There was pain in her eyes, but also something softer, almost grateful. Then she turned, gathering her shawl from the ground. Her steps were slow, hesitant, but certain. The rancher watched her walk toward the edge of the valley, where the light was fading fast. The sound of her footsteps faded into the rustle of dry grass. He wanted to call out, to say something that would make her stammer, not out of guilt, not out of pride, but because her leaving felt like the end of something he didn't know how to name. But he stayed silent. The sky darkened. A single drop of rain hit his cheek, cold and clean. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the storm gathered its strength. Somewhere out there, she was walking into the unknown, her spirit unbroken, and for the first time, the rancher realized that freedom wasn't something you could give, yet it was something you could only honor. The wind howled harder, sweeping dust across his boots. He looked down at his trembling hands and felt the weight of everything unsaid. Maybe he'd been wrong all along. Maybe love wasn't about keeping someone close, yet it was about letting them go, even if it meant standing alone in the storm. When the thunder cracked across the plains, he whispered to no one, "Then go. But don't you ever think I didn't care." The ranch was silent again, except for the rain beginning to fall. In the distance, her figure disappeared into the dusk, swallowed by the endless desert, and the ranchero, once the hardest man in the territory, felt something break open inside him, something that had been cold for far too long. He didn't chase her, he didn't call her name, he simply stood there, letting the rain wash the dust from his face, wondering if she'd ever know that when she said she'd rather die than be his, she had taught him what life really meant. The rain had come and gone by dawn, leaving the land breathing in mist and silence. The rancher barely slept that night, pacing the porch with the lantern in one hand and a bottle in the other. Every creak of the windmill, every groan of the old house reminded him of her absence. The chair by the fire, once where she mended her dress and hummed softly, now sat empty, mocking him with the quiet she'd left behind. He told himself it didn't matter. He'd done the right thing, letting her go. A man had to draw the line between what he wanted and what was right. But the truth was simpler and harder. He missed her, her fire, her voice, even her stubbornness. The ranch felt hollow without it. By noon, he saddled his horse and rode out toward the canyon where the tracks led. He told himself it was just to make sure she was safe, that was all. But deep down, he knew better. The desert stretched wide and cruel, and the kind of men who had once hunted her didn't quit easy. The trail was faint, washed out by rain, but he knew her steps light, uncertain, veering toward the old ridge trail that led north. It was dangerous ground, a narrow path surrounded by boulders, perfect for an ambush. The ranchers got twisted as he pressed forward, eyes sharp, rifle ready. Hours passed. The sun beat down on his hat, and the sound of cicadas filled the air. Then, just as the ridge rose before him, he saw Ida, her shawl caught on a mesquite branch, torn and fluttering like a flag of surrender. His heart dropped. He dismounted slowly, crouched, and found tracks in the sand. Boot prints, not hers, too wide, too heavy. Men, two, maybe three of them. The prints circled, fresh and deliberate. He felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. Damn it, he muttered. He'd been right. They'd found her. He followed the trail up the narrow pass, keeping low behind the rocks. The higher he climbed, the more the world seemed to close in, walls of red stone pressing on both sides. He could hear voices now, faint but sharp, echoing through the canyon. "Run, girl, run all you want," one shouted, laughing cruelly. The rancher's blood ran cold. He moved faster, each step silent, each breath measured. The path curved, and then he saw two men in ragged coats, rifles slung carelessly, standing by a wagon. One was dragging something from behind it. It was her, Clara. She was on her knees, wrists bound again, her hair tangled and face streaked with blood and dirt. Even then, she glared up at them, proud and unbroken. The rancher gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed to act, but he forced himself to wait. He had one shot, one chance to end this right. Then one of the men spat and raised his gun. "Should have stayed put, sweetheart," he sneered. "Would have saved yourself a lot of trouble." The other laughed. Maybe she liked the rancher's company too much. That did it. The rancher stepped out from cover, his voice cutting through the canyon like thunder. "Drop it." The men spun around. One fired immediately, the bullet whistling past the rancher's shoulder. He dove behind a boulder, returning fire. The shot rang through ear. One man fell instantly, his body hitting the dust with a dull thud. The other cursed, dragging Clara toward him, pressing a gun to her head. "Back off, cowboy," he shouted. "You take one more step, and she's done." The rancher froze, his rifle aimed steady. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The man was panicking, his hands shook. One wrong move and Clara was gone. "Let her go," The rancher growled. "You ain't walking out of here alive otherwise," the outlaw laughed. A dry, desperate sound. "Neither are you." Clara met the rancher's eyes then. Even from across the canyon, he could see the fire still alive in her. No fear, only defiance. "Slowly," she whispered, "don't a broken bar let him win." And that was all it took. The outlaw's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, the rancher moved. A flash of light up and the sound of a rifle crack split the air. But the shot didn't come from his gun. For a split second, he saw eye to the glint of steel from the rocks above. A third man, hidden, waiting. The rancher didn't think he just moved. He lunged forward, throwing himself between Clara and the unseen rifleman. The shot echoed again, louder, closer. He felt the burning impact tear through his side, knocking the breath out of him. Clara screamed as he hit the ground. The world spun. His vision blurred, colors fading to gray. He could barely make out the her breaking free, grabbing the outlaw's dropped pistol, the return fire, the distant sound of horses fleeing. Then silence. Only the wind. He gasped, clutching his wound, feeling warmth spread across his hand of blood. His chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath harder than the last. Clara crawled to his side, eyes wide with panic. "No, no, no, don't you do this," she whispered, pressing her hands against his side, trying to stop the bleeding. "You shouldn't have come." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Couldn't a broken bar let you walk into hell alone?" Tears cut through the dirt on her face. "You fool," she said softly. "You could have lived." He coughed, a weak laugh escaping. "Didn't much feel like living without you." The pain was unbearable, but he found her hand and squeezed it, his thumb brushing her skin. "I just wanted to see you free," he whispered, "even if I had to die for it." Her voice broke. "Don't you say that. You're not dying here." "Not for me." But he knew. The warmth was leaving his fingers. The sky above him swirled between blue and gold, the edges blurring. He could hear the cry of a hawk high above and smell the sage in the wind. "Clara, a broken bar." His voice was barely a breath. "Remember what I said, broken bar, you're free now. Don't waste it." She leaned close, tears falling onto his face. "I never hated you," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to love someone who tried to own me." He smiled faintly, eyes flickering. "Guess I finally learned a broken bar how to let go." And then his hand slipped from hers. The canyon went still. The wind stopped. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the woman who had once defied death itself held the man who had given everything for her freedom. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she laid his hat over his chest and whispered, "You were right. Out here, a broken bar, nobody lasts alone." The sun began to sink again, painting the rocks red and gold, the same way it had when she'd first defied him. But now the fire in her heart burned differently, and not in anger, but in remembrance. She stood, blood and dust clinging to her, and walked north once more, toward the horizon, toward freedom. Behind her, the rancher lay still beneath the open sky, a man who had finally done the unthinkably, not for pride, not for control, but for love.